Okay.
Okay, welcome everyone. This is a special meeting of the Norwich Planning Commission. I will keep admitting people, so forgive me for Zoom attending at the same time. So we have a full agenda. I would like to make a few introductory comments and then we can jump into the agenda. So I would like to say, first of all, that we're new to this, or some of us are new to this, including me, and we're trying to do it right. We're trying to do a good job of both having a planning commission that can really do the work and make policy decisions and maximize public participation. So we are working on ways to do that, and I hope maybe better than it's been done in the past. And so I would ask for people's help and to bear with us while we get the kinks out of the method. And so with that in mind, the one thing I'd like to say relative to today's agenda, because I can tell already that we may need some reminding on this. For us to be as efficient as possible, it's going to be really important to keep in mind what the question is on the table and speak to that question, not a bigger issue, a side issue, or something that isn't the question on the table. We'll talk about this a little bit when we talk about the organizational meeting and welcoming new members, but I want to put it on the table before we start talking agenda and public comments. The two issues that I know are on the agenda that this is important to relate to the upper level and solar and the affordable housing memo. And both of those, we need to keep in mind the question on the table. The question on the table for the solar project is whether or not the Planning Commission should reopen a discussion around a preferred siting letter. The question is not what are the merits of that decision, what is the background for that decision. The question right now will be, should we put it on a later agenda, to what degree of urgency, and that's the focus of that conversation tonight. Similarly, for the affordable housing memo coming out of the subcommittee, the question on the table for this commission is, should we forward a memo from our subcommittee to the select board that has to do with a $60,000 planning grant for that project? The question is not, is this a good project? Should we do it? How many units are going to fit? All that sort of thing. So I'm just asking the group to keep in mind what's the question on the table and are your comments pertinent to that question? So with that in mind, I will jump into the agenda, and with the first item of business being the agenda. So perhaps if we have a motion to approve the agenda, then we can discuss from there.
Motion to approve. Second.
Okay, moved and seconded to approve the agenda. Any discussion?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yeah, so a couple things. In terms of information we receive, I was looking at 5 and 6. We can receive correspondence, and I would like to ask that we include an agenda item that says receiving correspondence. So under 5, you've got the packet from Chris Clement and the Upper Loveland Solar packet. I'd just like to throw that into another agenda item, whether it's 5A or move everything down that says receiving correspondence.
I get a comment.
Stuart?
Yeah, I think that Jeff's on the right course here, but I would suggest that correspondence be right up near the top of the agenda early on. So it just, that's the way the select board's doing it. I think they're on the right course, and I agree with that. So that would be my suggestion.
So that would apply even if the correspondence applies to a specific agenda item? Jeff?
Yeah, Jan, so receiving correspondence should be independent from agenda items. So in theory, if we receive correspondence from Two Rivers, the select board, the Affordable Housing Subcommittee, there's this category where we, each meeting somewhere in the agenda, and I'm not going to suggest where, and it could be from the public. Folks have sent us stuff. Here it is. What do we want to do with it?
Okay. Any other comments just on that topic of correspondence? Help me out if I don't see hands or somebody wanting to speak.
No hands, Jan.
Oh,
Okay.
No, Stu just raised his hand.
Stuart, to correspondence or motion or the agenda in general?
the agenda in general. I would like to see the issue, one of the issues that you mentioned early on here. We have some folks who are interested in talking about the solar project and the issue of whether the planning commission has authority, statutory authority, to revise or review the letter that was issued way back. I think it's an important issue, and I think we need to put it behind us and make sure that we understand what we are permitted to do. And if we are permitted to consider the merits on both sides of the project itself, we need to put to rest the notion that we cannot or should not or are unable to review this de novo. So, and I'd like to see that on the agenda so that we can discuss the very points that you raised, Jan.
Jeff?
Yeah, I think to the extent we do that, it would have to be a future agenda item.
So question to the group. We have an agenda item that is to set future agenda items. To the extent that there is a question whether or not we would even put, we could or would put this issue on the agenda, is it worth discussing or taking comment just to that question? Should it be on a future agenda item?
Stuart has a hand raised.
Stuart? Yeah, I can see your right hand. If you stick with your right hand, Stuart, I can see it.
Okay. So I think it's important that we put this issue to bed, and there's no reason why we can't discuss it now. I think there's a real urgency to focus on this issue so that we can get to the larger issue, which is the project itself. So if we're not going to, and the whole thing is time sensitive. If you're talking about reviewing this sometime, kicking the can down the road and doing this sometime way in the future, that makes no sense to me at all. So I think it's an important issue. It needs to be resolved ASAP. And I would if we're going to talk about it, I have a bunch of things to say with regard to not only the urgency, but also with regard to legal opinions and other opinions that should be considered as part of this discussion.
Okay, Jeff?
Yeah, we have under item 6, agenda priorities, town plan amendment, preferred solar designation. We could, in theory, so if we're going to meet every 2 weeks, in theory, at this juncture, put this on our next agenda to address.
Mm-hmm. So what, let me get, if anybody else on the board, on the commission has an opinion, you know, the question on the table is, does the board want to hear input on the question of whether we can or should open up the topic and put, so we either put, let me put it this way, I think there are two options. We can put the question of whether we can even reopen on a future agenda. We can have some input on that now and decide what to put on a future agenda after that input. Is there other board comments to just that agenda setting topic? Ernie?
I'm just in favor of whenever there is an issue that people don't agree on, or there's different opinions or something like that. To me, since this is a deliberative body, we definitely should at least put, you know, sort of the question of whether we can just revisit the decision or discuss it further or anything like that.
Chris?
I agree with Ernie to the extent that I think it's really important that we understand the regulations and statutory limitations to what we can and should do. So I appreciate that we need to discuss this. I think that I'm almost wondering if the discussion should be, what is our statutory allowance? Just historically, what can the PC do? I think it's just that kind of background, that history, that kind of information, I think will help us not get caught up in gray lines. And so that when we move forward, we're not all stumbling over whether or not we actually have the statutory authority to proceed in anything like that.
Okay. So I think just we have Mary Gorman from the public. I think so. It sounds like what I'd like to do is open it up to the question of helping us to the agenda setting topic. The question is, what are the arguments, in brief, please, of course, to the Planning Commission's ability to revisit this question of the preferred siting letter, and to some degree the urgency thereof, because that will help us set agendas, whether it's something we need to deal with in the next 3 meetings or what's the urgency. So I would open up that topic for comment, and let's see where it goes. Jeff first, just a second, Mary.
Yeah, so Jan, if the commission says this is important to us, let's put it on our next agenda to address what Ernie and Chris just said. Otherwise, let's create another agenda item to receive correspondence.
Jeff, are you saying this can be included in a correspondence agenda item?
No, Jan, what I'm saying is to the extent we are pursuing what our legal lawful responsibilities are, which I agree with, what are those responsibilities? That can't be addressed tonight. Therefore, let's put it on our, let's put it on the next agenda item, assuming the group, the majority of the group wants to do that. Otherwise, the only other agenda change that I'm seeing is creating an item that receives correspondence.
So I think we can satisfy both in the sense that if we make that change to the agenda, and which would be to amend the motion to make a slight change to accept the amendment of adding correspondence. At that point, we then open it up for public comment, public commentary, and if the public wishes to speak on the issue of solar and whether we can, what are the arguments for revisiting that, then it's public comment period if they want to speak to that. So I would propose, was that a thumbs up, Jeff, or a?
Yeah, it is. Once we approve the agenda, then we're into public comment. Yes.
Right. So that would be my preference, is to not change the agenda, but because we have topics where we're trying to understand our agendas over the upcoming meetings, let's take public comment as it might help us with that. So will we, Jeff, I think it's your motion, modify that to add correspondence?
Yes, Jan, whatever our secretary decides, create an item to receive the correspondence.
I think 5A sounds good. 5A sounds good.
All right, 5A. So we're call the question to approve the agenda with that modification to add 5A for correspondence. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Opposed?
Okay. Do we need a roll call, or it's
No,
got it, Vince?
No.
I think it's 6-1. Stuart, no. Okay. Now we're into public comment. Do I have any comments from the public? Mary?
Hi, Mary Gorman, Norwich resident. I would just suggest that if this is something that the committee wants to have an in-depth conversation about, that we put it on the agenda for the next time. Just more that I received the agenda today, maybe yesterday, I don't know. And a number of people I think who would want to be on the call are not here. And so I don't know whether that would be something you would consider, but I do hope you'll take a look at it. We would like to provide some material in preparation for any discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just a second, Jeff, or you don't count as the public yet, unless we don't.
yeah, Jan, I just want to recognize that we have two people in the public, and I just want to get their names on the record. That's my goal.
Okay, or did they want to
Yes,
speak,
sir.
or they're just in the
I just
room?
want to identify them as members of the public that are present.
Okay,
Yeah, my name. My name is Joel Stettenheim, and I'm a Norwich resident and president of Norwich Technologies. Thank you, Ernie. I don't necessarily have any public comment now. Just trying to understand, Jan, as you were saying, kind of what's being decided now. So I guess is the decision at this point that this will be something that will be addressed at a future meeting, or is it still open about whether or not we're going to be talking about And is that what's being talked about now, whether or not the board has the authority to review, or is that something we're doing later?
Jan, as a point of order,
Right now, we're taking public comment on anything that's not on the agenda. Setting future agendas and their priorities and urgency is an item on the agenda. So we will certainly be talking about that later in the evening.
All right, then I'll let Troy, then I won't have any comment other than.
Hi, I'm Troy McBride, also Norwich Solar, Norwich Technologies, and a Norwich resident.
Great, thank you.
that was all I wanted to do is identify these two folks in the audience. Thank you.
Okay, so noted. Any other public comment? Okay,
So one,
so I can count you as the public steward, but I can for now. Stewart?
yeah, so I think the comment that was made by Mary Gorman underscores the advisability of having our agendas published, even though the requirement is only 2 days before. It underscores if there's going to be a review time, it really would be helpful if our agendas are published earlier than that, so people can have a chance to review whatever is in correspondence and whatever we might want to talk about in a meeting. So again, 2 days is the requirement. I think the select board publishes, I'm not quite sure, I think it's 4 or 5 days in advance. But
Yep.
whatever it is, it's helpful to have it in advance. So if we can do that, I think that would be very good.
Well, let's use that as a segue, because the next item on the agenda has to do with welcoming our new members and revisiting the organizational meeting decisions that we made last meeting, so that we're all operating by the same rules. So with that, I would say first, welcome to Bob and Chris. We're now up to full strength, and to go back over just quickly in brief, it was in the minutes, but I think some of the highlights of what we're trying to do is make it so that the Planning Commission can really be a working deliberative body that sets the policies on some very important issues in town. To the degree that we have staff or will get staff, we would use them to help implement those policies, but this board certainly wanted to be in the driver's seat, and certainly anybody can chime in. We will, as we said, strive to meet or exceed the open meeting law requirements, and in a way that, in the exceed part, I would say in a way that really encourages public participation. So that is a goal. And then in terms of both productive meetings and treating everybody with respect, whether they're on the board or the public, we will be using Robert's Rules of Order to more or less formality, depending on what's needed to keep the conversation focused. And I think I would like to really ask the board to, if we want to do the work, if we want to be a working commission, then we're going to have to put the time in, and we're going to have to be prepared, and so we're going to have the packets to review beforehand. We're going to, I want us to be able to have the expectation that when we show up at a meeting or a committee meeting, that we've done all the reading and we're able to talk to questions and comments, not restate what's in the packet. So that's part of how I see a working group. And we will certainly be using committees, small working groups, both to be more efficient and get more done and work in parallel, and as a way to get more of the public involved as members of those groups. So any other comments from the board? And I think Stuart's, I'd like to keep on the table and ask the board to comment on anything I just said, but also the idea of, do we want to set a policy of packets and packets with the agenda included being available sooner? The open meeting law is 24 hours for a special meeting, 48 hours for a regular. Do we want to set a bar sooner than that? Jeff?
Yes, Jan, if we're going to meet every 2 weeks, and I'm going to miss what the time frame is, to the extent that's the case, let's have our agendas and packets ready for 5 days, whatever the rules require, in advance of the meetings.
Is there a rule 4 or 5 days, or is that simply select board practice and not?
So I thought that the isn't it 5 days? What's the notice period? Sorry.
Required.
No, required is 24 and 48, special and regular.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, you were, sorry,
Go ahead, Stuart.
you were correct, I think. It's select board practice, and for good
Right.
reason, just so that people can review material beforehand and try and be conversant and intelligent when the meeting comes around. If you get it a day or two before, it's very difficult for many people to review something. So I'm supporting, I don't know if you want a motion on it or whatever, but I'm supporting.
No,
what Jeff-
yeah, so I'm asking, I think, is it the sense of this group that we would like to match the select board policy of 5 days before the meeting, having the packet, which includes the agenda, out for review? Is
Go ahead.
that,
I was just gonna say, that's. I
Raising
think-
our hands, yes.
Vince?
My answer is yes.
My
Okay,
answer is yes, I was off camera, so just wanted to say,
okay, thank you, Vince. Thank you for
not being off camera.
So my vote would be sooner than better, Jan.
Okay. So that's one question. And another one that came up in the conversation was the details of exactly where and how to publish, even just the 1 day thing, if it's on the listserv and some people get their listserv as a compilation in the morning, then what was 24 hours shrinks down to 12 at that point or something. So the letter of the law talks about 3 places around town, website, and the listserv is sort of a side thing. Do we have an agreement, or is it a policy, say the select board again, that we could piggyback on, of exactly where to post and how to make sure everybody sees that in that 5 days before we're talking about? Jeff?
Yeah, so where is the third place the select board posts?
I don't know. I know the
I
3
can-
places is what is stated in the law. It may be that the listserv is counting as the third. So we're talking the bulletin board in front of Tracy.
Used to be the bulletin board. I don't know if we haven't been doing that as far as I know.
There is a board out here,
It's the one across the street.
right, and Dan and Waits.
Stuart?
Just one more comment. It was pointed out to me, I just got a text, that the select board does have a deadline for things that are going to be considered or part of correspondence. They require it to be Thursday at noon for a Wednesday meeting. So
Yep.
if we were to follow that, if we're going to be Tuesday, so then the deadline should be a day before. That should be Tuesday. So the week before, Tuesday at noon, for you to receive and or whoever's going to be issuing the material.
The following day for the packet. Okay, just a second, Chris?
So I do know that the town, the listserv, I don't know how many other people on the PC get it, but the town does have, I forgot what it's called, the town list. So outside of the listserv, I think Miranda has typically done official correspondence through the town list. And then she has now also included the listserv. So they're really two separate things. And that you can clarify with Miranda, but I forgot how many people I think are on the town email list. And then officially, I know the select board and the listers have been putting it in the library on the bulletin board. I think Cheryl would be able to tell us. I think also at the post office. And then Dan and Wintz is not considered an official site. I think they just do that. It's what's considered official, I believe, is the bulletin board. Cheryl, what is official? I know the bulletin board is one official, the town website and the town list are considered official. I don't know if the library is actually considered official or not.
Jan, are you okay with me
Yeah,
speaking?
go ahead, Cheryl.
Okay, so
Thank you.
typically the postings that I'm aware of are the issuance of the message out on the listserv, at which point there's a link on the town website for the meeting, if there's packet or whatever's there being sent out. Then a paper agenda is put on the bulletin board in front of Tracy Hall and at the post office. If another location is needed, the listers have used the library. And you can put one inside of Tracy Hall. It seems like a duplicate, but there is, the board has been completely reorganized and giving, space to everybody now. So it is a welcoming spot now to post an agenda.
Okay. So can I take it as the sense of the board, see if I can summarize this? We would like to set, if we take the select board's policy as a guideline, we would like to set a deadline for submissions from the public or board members for the packet to be, the select board does Thursday at noon, so we can do Wednesday at noon. The preceding a Tuesday meeting, the packet to then come out by the end of the following day. So the packets would come out Thursday afternoon. So Wednesday noon coming in, Thursday close of business, full packet out, and then posted at least those two sites, listserv and website. Jeff?
Yeah, the only caveat for me on this is if others submit correspondence after it's published, we could receive that as correspondence at our meeting. So to the extent it's available, it could be added subsequently. Doesn't mean we're going to take it up. We're just going to receive it.
Okay, so there is an option to receive correspondence. It won't be in the packet. Therefore, there's no reason to think people will have seen it beforehand, but we can receive it. Okay. Is that a
I
valid
agree.
sense of the board to play by those rules?
Yes, excellent idea.
Okay. Are there any other comments to the agenda topic relative to how we want to do business? Any questions? I thought that I had Pam include that Vermont Secretary of State open meeting law summary. I thought it was a good document. I made a 1.5-page version of the same information, but there are other good resources out there. But certainly, if any questions come up, we can address them. I sent a question to Marcia earlier, a couple days ago, and got a specific question answered on that. But any other comments to the agenda item of how we want to do business as a commission? And obviously, we can adjust as we go forward. Okay. Let's step to the next thing, which is the chair report. Now, in keeping what I was asking the group to do, I am not going to go through this other than if there are questions. This was a memo to the commission on several items that I was chartered to do since the last meeting. Obviously, Vince knocked the hybrid meeting out of the park in terms of enabling that. So thank you to Vince. So I guess on that topic, I would simply ask the board, do we feel confident enough in our abilities to do this again so that we will warn the next meeting as a hybrid meeting? And if people agree with that, then we're over that hurdle.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, I think it's working well.
great. Thank you, Vince. Stuart?
Yes,
Okay. Good. You see my note about the planning director. I will, for right now, there's very little activity, but I will be the contact person unless somebody else wants to jump in and do that, but it's a contact person without much going on right now. My hope would be that we get candidates to talk about, and then we can decide how to get a committee to review things and so forth. Jeff?
Yeah, so my perspective, so let me step back, and I am glad to be corrected and constrained, is that there was a time on the Planning Commission when the Planning Commission had a role to do employee reviews, to talk about who gets engaged and hired and so forth. And along came a town manager form of government that basically said to the Planning Commission, and I'm trying to be polite, you will no longer have a say in this. And most recently, what I've seen from our recent town managers is that the town managers are picking people in the community to help select folks for permanent positions that have absolutely no experience whatsoever. So I'm trying to be polite. Stuart, help me be polite. So at this juncture, I'd like to say, to the extent Brennan would like someone with experience to advise the selection of a person in this role, I would be delighted to serve in that role, given my 40 years in this capacity.
Okay. I think, so I hear you, Jeff, and I am perfectly, I agree with you, and I would ask anybody else to chime in, but I think there's no question in my mind that this commission should have a direct say in the staff that is going to be working for us and working with us. That seems to me to be rather obvious. So I would want to be able to do that right now, given no candidates on the table. But what is on the table is the job description. And so if to the degree that we want to participate right now, that would be making sure that job description is what we want. Ernie, then Jeff.
The statute that authorizes the Planning Commission includes one of the duties of the Planning Commission to bring people's names to the select board for appointment as like the zoning administrator. And I also want to talk about, if I can, the concept of zoning director, a planning director, which is inappropriate for the town of Norwich because we're not an urban, we're not a city. That's the reserve. The planning director is defined as someone who is hired sort of like a town manager and handles a department, none of which is volunteer or appointed. It's just a bunch of people hired. A zoning administrator is what we're familiar with. So we should stop.
Right.
We got to be careful.
So that gets to my point about whether we want to evaluate the job description and make sure it's whether we want to have any input on that. Jeff?
Yeah, I was going to follow up. I agree with Ernie, what he said. And in a past planning commission, we were presented with a job description that made absolutely no sense to me with my years of experience. And I submitted to the Planning Commission, Brennan and others, a job description that I think more appropriately suits what we're looking for. And I'd like to put that on a near-term agenda item.
Okay. I definitely, I hear you on that. So we can put that on the list. I have one more question after that. Stuart?
So I think that Jeff is a very good choice to be the liaison in this regard. And I think that there's a fair amount of thank you that's due, not only to you, Jan, but to Vince and to Jeff for doing, I mean, there's an inordinate amount of work that's going on. And as far as my 2 cents, so a big thank you. As far as my 2 cents on the selection of the planning/zoning person, we currently have absentee people filling those jobs. And I would be much happier, and I don't know if this is doable, but I would be much happier if we could find people locally who would do this job. It just, where they have a stake in the town, they've been here, they know something about the town. If that were possible, to me, that would be a step forward.
Okay. So what I wanted to ask was, and I would certainly accept and ask the group to confirm that we would empower Jeff to be our representative on this. My question then is what prep work might be worth doing or empowering him to do in preparation for this being on an agenda? Do we need a conversation with the town manager? Do we need to pull out different job descriptions and so forth? Do we need to talk about it now to make it more useful on the agenda soon? Jeff?
Yeah, so Jan, if we put this on the next agenda, what I'd like to do is circulate. I sent the job description to Brennan. I'd like to circulate that to the commission so it can be on our next agenda, or if the commission says the one after that, to evaluate. And then the commission can decide the extent to which you would present this to Marcia and or Brennan and the role that I might play in that context.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that? That sounds like we have a plan for, we'll talk about exactly whether it's one meeting from now or 2 meetings from now when we get to agenda priorities later. Anything else on how we do business as a group? Okay. I'm just double checking that there wasn't anything. Yeah, the one other thing on my memo, which I thought was worth thinking about. We talked about what's in the files, what planning and zoning digital information was what I was calling it. I talked to Pam, I talked to Brennan. There are certainly files. There is a computer upstairs. That is what Kyle Katz uses when he's here 2 days a week. The laptop stays here. Pam is digging through some things and looking. She has things that were on Ron Francis's computer. And it sounded like it would speed things up. I asked her to generate a list of specifics, or at least categories of what she's got, what she's finding. And then if we could do the other side of that and ask for specific things that we would like to have, then we could kind of meet in the middle and it would be faster to come up with these things. So I think we don't need to put it out now in real time, but I would ask the commission members to jot down, there's a checklist from Phil Deckert's days of what zoning reg amendments we want to do, or there was this and such discussed about town plan amendment, what are those things? And then Pam, Kyle, and or one of us can go in and burrow around in those files. So I would ask the group, and feel free to submit that into the packet for the next meeting, just so we have a place to put it. What are the things we're looking for to be able to do our job? Stuart?
So I'd request, given the importance of discussion on the solar project, that we have a copy of the letter that was written back in, I'm not sure when, 2021 or 2022. I think it would be informative to know exactly what the letter says. And if we are going to discuss anything, that's, you know, at the heart of the matter.
Okay, so I can make a note of that now. I would ask that you and any others put that on the bulleted list. It's got to, because we're meeting every 2 weeks, that means you got about 8 days to get it in, to have it in the packet. So, and once it's in there, then what's good about the 5 days before is that we can do a little bit of work, you know. So if Pam has a list that comes with the packet that everybody has mentioned, then she can do a little digging to prepare for the meeting.
So
Stuart?
just to clarify, so would you like me to make the request, or will you make the request, or who's going to make the request? To get that?
Right now, I would say you and any other commission member who has a specific query, do we have such a thing? Can we find it? Be as specific as possible. If you got dates, if you got, you know, titles, and get those to, you can get them to me. I'm happy to compile a list and send them to Pam, or get them to Pam. Okay. And Bob, just like Jeff, Bob or Chris, do you have something?
No, you answered my question. Thank you.
Okay, Chris?
So I've spent a lot of time in that office for personal reasons, getting permits and a lot of different things that have happened in the last 30, 40 years. And what I think would be helpful for some maybe new members that aren't familiar is if Pam could add a list of all the types of resources that are tools that will help everybody. And it's so specifically to Stuart's request for that letter, the PUC, when they are going through the process of the CP, you know, the certain CPGs, there's a number that any one of us can go back and look at any documentation that's been handed to. Now, I'm not sure if everybody is aware of that. The E911, it wasn't Rod, I think it was Phil, years ago had explained to me about the E911 map. It's a great resource. You can look at parcels. I think the listers have a lot of information. So it'd be just really nice for Pam to say to new members who aren't familiar, these are some excellent resources for PC members to utilize.
Right. So that's a very good idea. And I would expand on that, because I think obviously Pam is not the only resource to help us connect with those resources. So I would certainly encourage us to do it informally, to be able to share, you know, because I've been digging around on the regional commission site, and the mapping resources are phenomenal. There's a huge amount of stuff out there. So Marcia forwarded me a 130-page state guideline for municipal plans. That's very well done. And clearly Jeff and Ernie and others that have been here considerably longer can, or DRB, sources of information. So any other ideas that people want to throw on the table relative to how do we cross-train, essentially? How do we, because I know I have vast amounts to learn, several other brand new members, and then some real veterans, and some in between. Any other suggestions to that end? Jeff?
Yeah, so on the solar front, Jan, I would offer more commentary under agenda item 6A. I don't want to get ahead of myself. And then with respect to our resources, I would also like to address that when we get to agenda 6.
Okay. That's fine. I would certainly just ask everybody to keep in mind, it's a piece of the, how do we be a working commission? If we want to be a working commission, then we got to know our stuff. We can't wait around for staff to deliver it up on a plate. So that means we need to be able to find something on a map, find a document, find a draft zoning reg from some other resource. So anything we can do to share resources, certainly feel free to make a list of 5 useful places to go and put that out where everybody can see it. Okay. All right, so let us jump into the meat of things in terms of content. We have an official request from our subcommittee on affordable housing. And as I said before, I think, Jeff, you were on the line when I said that, but the question on the table, the request on the table is for the Planning Commission to forward that memo to the Select Board. And then there's a whole sequence of dates that work up to potentially applying for a planning grant. That is the topic on the table. So maybe I will ask Jeff if you have anything. I'm assuming people did their homework and read the memo. But Jeff, if you have any quick background you want to give just to set the stage, that would be helpful.
Sure. Jeff Lubell, the head of the Affordable Housing Subcommittee. And I just want to start by thanking you for taking this up so quickly. And thanks as well to Chris for providing some useful background about the radio tower on the property and some of the documentation and about the zone around it, et cetera. So this is the outgrowth of a review that the Affordable Housing Committee did pursuant to the town plan of publicly owned land that the town of Norwich owns. In particular, we did a thorough review of all of the parcels and identified a small number of them that might have some potential for developing affordable housing. We are recommending that a planning grant be submitted from the town to the Vermont Community Development Program to basically investigate the feasibility of the northern half of the parcel that also contains the transfer station in the town garage. This is about a 10-acre parcel. There is a radio tower in there. The area that we are looking at for development is north of that and north of the cone around it. There are several reasons why we think it would be a good parcel. We don't need to talk a lot about that today. I know you want to focus on the question on hand, but in brief, it's fairly close into town. We think it's likely there's good septic, good soils for septic. We think that it's something that could support a small number of units. It's not going to be a huge project. And basically, when we brought this to the Select Board, previously they had raised a couple of issues and the memo tries to address them. One issue had to do with concern that there might be some trash on that had been buried on the site. And the second had to do with issues around environmental justice and being so close to the transfer station and to the town garage. And the memo responds to those concerns. We have identified a process that would allow for some environmental assessments that could identify whether there are problems, and if so, could provide funding for addressing them. It's a little bit of a complicated process because we would need a third party to acquire or at least assert an interest in acquiring the property in order to qualify for that program. But we have identified the Green Mountain Economic Development Corporation as a party that might be interested in doing that if we get to that stage. And Two Rivers Ataquiche is Regional Commission is open to administering the grant if we are awarded it. So there's a fairly tight timetable if we're going to apply in the September round. There needs to be a notice of a public hearing by mid-August, and the public hearing needs to be held in early September. To do before doing that we really want to go back to the select board and get some input about whether they are comfortable with us moving forward with this project. There's a lot of work that needs to be done to prepare the application, and we need to just get some feedback. So we're hoping to move this forward and would welcome obviously your input, but really are hoping for your endorsement and forwarding this memo on to the select board for decision.
Okay. Board discussion. Jeff?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to forward this to the select board.
Second,
Okay,
Been
moved and
seconded.
seconded.
that was me, Vince.
Yep. Got it. All right, moved and seconded. So discussion, Jeff?
Yeah, I don't have anything to say pro or con. I just don't see any reason not to advance this, agree or disagree, to get the process started with the select board, given the time frame.
Stuart?
So I'm taken aback actually by the dollar amount that we're talking about. $60,000 is a fair piece of change. And even though $6,000 is the town share, if I understand correctly, it's still, to me, an inordinate amount of money to look at and try and evaluate a site, either from an engineering point of view, a marketing point of view, or any other point of view. And I'm speaking from some experience as the founder of Norwich Affordable Housing, Inc., the only nonprofit affordable housing company ever in Norwich, keeping in mind also the need for affordable housing. That's not the issue. There is a need. There's been an affordable housing committee, either under the Planning Commission or solo, for 35 years, and there's been absolutely no affordable housing built by this town. So the question is not the need. And when I was an advisor, a real estate advisor to Twin Pines Housing, I was surprised there at the waste of money that went on, that was spent by Twin Pines Housing. I just feel that the assessment of this property can and should be done for less money. So, and for that reason, I am reluctant to support this. So thank you.
Okay. Chris?
If I understand the memo correctly, the select board had concerns. And they sent it back to the planning commission to actually do, I think, some due diligence, because otherwise they would have made the decision on their own. So I guess my feeling is with Stuart is, I agree. I think the money is a big commitment. And I think that there are definitely things that the members of the planning commission could vet out before we just kick the can back to the select board this quickly. And I don't really find that this town commits itself into these rush decisions with very little amount of deliberation. So I've seen it happen too many times in the select board. I've seen it happen on the PC. It happened with the town plan, and I can go a list a mile long of decisions that were just made so quickly. And like Stuart said, we've been trying to find affordable housing for years. I do not understand how a simple deadline of September, when the grant could be going after again until we actually really do our due diligence. And that's the only reason I would disagree, is that I don't really want to make a decision based on this is a rush job. I fail to see the reason why it needs to be rushed. When Jeff did make it clear that, again, this can be revisited. This isn't a grant that is going to disappear because we didn't meet a deadline. It's a grant that can be revisited. But unless I don't, I'd like to see us deliberate. I think the tower and the information that I presented, I got to say, Jeff LaBelle, although I'm probably not supposed to talk to you, but I find it disappointing you guys presented without even mentioning the tower. I think that in itself tells me that there could probably be more deliberation. And then also the CPG certification also very clearly states that, I didn't underline it, but it's 23, about keeping the site, the visual impact. It's in the CPG order that visual impact cannot going forward affect it. And I think that the residents around the transfer station were extremely upset about that, and that the only time that the town agreed to that tower was that there was going to be appropriate screening. So I'd like to see us as members of the planning commission discuss that. I mean, I don't know why we'd be kicking it back to the select board without us doing some more thorough deliberation about it.
Yeah.
I'm done. Sorry.
Okay, nope, that's fine. Thank you. Jeff?
Yeah, so to pick up on one of Stuart's points, the Affordable Housing Subcommittee has not rushed anything. For many years, there has been no rush. So I just want to be clear that from my perspective as a member of the Affordable Housing Subcommittee, there have been public sessions where the Affordable Housing Subcommittee has said, here's what we're looking at, here's where we're headed, here's why. And it's been quite deliberative, I would argue, publicly. I think it's true that the select board has changed membership, the planning commission has changed in membership. So to the extent members of the planning commission want to say, hey, you know what, we want to revisit this in person, to me, that's a legitimate question to ask current planning commission members. In my case, I'd rather just flip it to the select board to allow that debate to occur with the select board, including the points that Stuart and Chris made.
Stuart?
So I'm remembering a change in zoning with the Agway property. We went ahead and we rezoned that area in order to facilitate the construction of affordable housing. We did that before we knew that there was a possibility of sewage disposal. So one suggestion would be, before we do anything, hire an engineer and find out whether we do have good septic capability, if that hasn't already been done. If it's been done, great, but there are other preliminary steps that could, in my opinion, and should be made as a former real estate developer in order to make sure that this is going in the right direction.
Jeff LaBelle?
Yeah, thank you all for the question. So yeah, this is something that we have been debating now for several years. It's something that's gone through a lot of public process. The purpose of the planning grant is really to gather the additional information that is needed to be able to understand fully all of the, in a more nuanced way, all of the constraints on the site, and to develop a site plan to assess the the slopes and the impact of the potential for water, the potential for wastewater. All of that is covered by the grant. And one other thing that's really important is that the grant would also cover the surveying and the costs related to a subdivision of that property, which would be necessary in order to, it has to do with the BRELA program and being able to transfer the property to a third party, and that has a cost too. So the other point is there's no reason to, if we get, so it's a very small a cost for the town. If we were to knock off $10,000, it would only reduce the cost to the town by $1,000, right? So it's not a huge impact on the town. So we're proceeding on the recommendation of the Two Rivers that we request the full amount. There will be an opportunity that time too to get public input. There will be a planning process. I really think what we really need to do is gather all of the information that's needed and the purpose of this grant. We're not asking for a zoning change right now. We're asking to gather the information, and we're trying to do it in the most cost-effective way possible. So rather than paying on our own for an engineer, for example, to do the septic, we're asking for a grant that will cover that cost, right? And so this is actually the most cost-effective way for the town to fully flesh out and understand all of the issues so that we can make an informed decision about whether to proceed. There's no response, no requirement that you proceed. The purpose of this is to learn and to gather the information and to do that in a way that really helps, defray the cost to the town.
Yeah.
Yeah, so to Stu's point, with where Willing Hands is now, on my way to a combat zone for a year, I said to folks, there's no wastewater capacity on this site for what's being proposed. Nonetheless, VHCB and others devoted $30,000 to determine there's no wastewater capacity on this site. That's not the case on this town property. The concern I have on this property is because, as I understand it, Aaron Lamperti made the point that Neil Fulton identified the presence of some form of solid waste in the ground that could be an environmental threat, for lack of a better way to say it. I think it's critical that the town identify, is that true? To the extent it's true, what do we do about it? And how do we remediate that without bringing that liability to the town? So for me personally, I think the main issue to proceed with this or advance this to the select board to say, hey, look, let's work with the RPC to engage folks that can assess the environmental liability associated with this property, and then we can decide how to proceed from there.
Jeff Lubell.
Yeah, just to that point, what we've been told by the RPC is that they really recommend that we move forward with a planning grant, that they are not in a position to do a formal environmental assessment until we have a site plan, until we have a feasible project. So from their perspective, as I understand it, the order is move forward with a planning grant, do the site planning, do the regulatory constraints, figure out the water, address the issues that Chris has raised, address the issue that Stuart has raised, really try to understand it. If there is at that point a viable project and it makes sense to move forward, then we can ask them for funding for the environmental assessment. And we have worked out a process for moving forward with that assessment and having a third party be brought in to insulate the town from liability. So this is very much a conservative approach, trying to minimize the risk to the town while moving forward with using a property that is currently underutilized, really to benefit the full town.
Okay, Stuart, and then we'll see if we can close this up. Yep.
Okay, thanks once again. So as far as I know, everybody sitting in this room and everybody listening and everybody on all these committees, we are all Vermont taxpayers. So when you talk about it's only a small amount for the town, yes, the share that we are going to be paying from the town's coffers is relatively small, but we do pay Vermont taxes, and to spend what I consider to be an excessive amount of money without doing some due diligence before we move forward. And I'm thinking about an engineering study, do some test holes, do some testing to see whether Neil Fulton is correct about whether there is some environmental considerations that would be very costly and something that we really don't want to get involved in. So it seems to me that those are the steps that should be taken before we move forward. And thanks again for letting me provide my 2 cents.
Mhm. Chris?
I'll wrap it up. But I'm going to agree with Stuart again. I do not take grants lightly. It is taxpayers. It's, it's all coming out of our pocket. But what I also wanted to see, and why I did the thing with the E911, is that you guys have made it clear that given that the tower is located in the dead center of the 10 acres, you can't use the first 13 acres because it's already dedicated to W and the transfer station. It's really only working with 10 acres. You take that 10 acres and then you take the perimeter around the structure of the tower, the screening, and then you said in the memo you didn't want housing to be looking over the site of the transfer station. So you really are only looking at the northern side. And based on, again, my rough calculations, and I mean rough calculations, it looks like you're talking about 5 acres. So what I make one step further is that Phil and any zoning administrator we've had has been able to do a density calculation based on that land. They can easily say, well, the density calculation for that piece of property around that 5 acres would be such and such and such and such. It seems to me that, again, this preliminary data that we can take the time to collect and then say, okay, is getting a grant for $60,000 for 3 houses going to be worth it? It just seems to me that I would have liked to say, yeah, now we've got 6 acres we're going to work with. You can get the road in. You're not going to be, getting right of ways to Alcott, or that you have access. This is the kind of stuff that our ZA would have done as a paid employee. All that preliminary work. And see, that's what I'm saying. It's administrator, we would have gotten a lot of those questions answered and then say, yeah, this is looking like a great idea. Then let's go for the grant. It just seems that there's a lack of preliminary, really obvious things that we could identify before rushing this to the select board. And I also, by the way, I also find rushing this is going to be another public thing, that the tower in itself was a big debacle. And now you're talking about cutting down a lot of trees, and that's going to expose the tower. So I think we should walk into this project cautiously, that, if that tower, you're suddenly going to have to clear cut 3 to 4 acres to do however many houses you think might happen. We're getting ourselves into another beehive of very contentious discussions because nobody did their homework. Just literally just such little amount of homework before we take this to the public and have another public outcry. That's
So let me just say a couple things, and then Jeff, because I do think your point is well taken, in the sense that if we had staff, we would be able to do legwork that we aren't in a position to do now. And to some degree, at least as I see it, some portion of the grant is work that would have been done by staff in doing that legwork. And so we're in an understaffed position. That's one thing. The other thing I would suggest to help us move forward here is, it is perfectly valid for us to submit this to forward this to the select board with a set of concerns or a set of topics that we want on the table. We're continuing the conversation, but we're being clear that we want that conversation to include the amount of funding, the sequencing of work, the questions to be answered in what order, the Brella land transfer, the tower aesthetics. You know, if it is perfectly acceptable for us to forward with concerns as a way of addressing both of these. Jeff?
Yeah, so I don't understand the staff comment, and I don't mean that in any way negatively. This is a very uncomplicated paradigm that relates to the subdivision regulations. So the PRD approach, what's the acreage? What do we subtract? It's 2 units per acre. How many lots, how many units are available in that context? It's among the most simple, perfunctory exercises that I can conceive of performing, which the Planning Commission could readily take up if it wants to do that going forward.
Jeff Lubell?
If I could just really quickly, we did ask Kyle to give us information about how many units the property could support on the 10 acres. And the answer was that there are affordable housing, 12 to 15 units that would include the affordable housing bonus. So just, we have done that work. Thank you.
And can I just ask, did that include his taking the tower and the fall into consideration?
I can't say that I know exactly how he made that determination.
Yeah. And then let's.
So the tower wouldn't affect density, Jan. It would affect where the units could be placed.
Okay, can we close on this? Any other comments? We can either call the question as is, or we can specifically tack on a little bit to the motion, or say that the Planning Commission is in a position to, we can charter somebody to collect the concerns that we want to piggyback with this as it goes to the select board. Any preference on that before we pinch this off?
Can you repeat the motion, Jeff? Do you mind?
Not at all. I mean, my motion was to forward this to the select board. I don't recall, I mean, unless Vince wrote down more.
No, that was
Yeah.
just the forward memo to the select board.
Because it
So
was
I think
seconded,
that-
right?
And it was seconded, yeah. So my only comment, I can call that question. I just am asking whether the group wants to amend that to say that we will ask for a volunteer to compile a list of topics or concerns that will go along with that forwarded thing into the select board's conversation. That's my only suggestion to allow some of these things to be flagged. Is that something that people would support, Ernie?
I think that would be a good idea to do. I mean, I think it's important to do that. If it's going to be approved at all.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Stuart?
So I would like to turn that around and write the select board a letter expressing our concerns without approving. And I think that is a more judicious way to approach this. So.
Jeff, I have a motion
I
on the
didn't
table.
make a motion to approve this, Jan, just to agree with Stuart. My motion was to forward this, and I see no reason not to. How do I say this in the affirmative? I think in that context, to the extent the commission has concerns, they should be forwarded with this memo to the select board.
So do we need to amend the motion to add that list, or can we leave that as an informal?
So I'd like to amend my motion to forward this request from the Affordable Housing Subcommittee to the Select Board to include consideration of the tower density issues wastewater issues, uh,
Toxic waste.
the landfill issues, the waste issues. And if anybody else can think of anything else, please add that.
Yes, visual impact. It states very clearly in the CPG under 23A that, I'm sorry, I don't have it.
That's fine. I'll add visual impact to my amendment to the motion.
And
It just, again, in the findings that it's, sorry.
All right, I think if it's listed.
Okay,
as-
here it is. It says right here, the project will be located, Jensen, visibility of the project will be mitigated by surrounding forest canopy in a regular terrain where the project will be located. So again, that's CPG findings. So I would say visual impact by what the order of the CPG is a pretty big thing to be considered.
Okay, so that's on your list.
I'm glad to include that, Jan, in my amendment.
Okay, Ernie, do you have something else to put on that list?
yes, I also have both social and environmental justice concerns in this as well. And I'd like to see them passed along.
Okay, so Vince, do you have those amendments first written down as secretary, and then do you approve that as the seconder?
Let's see, so I had amends motion to include considerations for the impact of septic, the cell tower, the landfill, wastewater, visual impact, and social and environmental justice. Is there
Okay.
something?
And you're okay with that on your second?
I'll second that, yes.
Okay,
Mind adding cost?
Yeah.
yeah,
Cost.
all right. Can we call
Can I
that
just-
question?
One more,
Okay,
Can I
Chris,
just- one more, just real quick, just when we talk about the tower, I think it's important that the select board understands that it's in our own regulations, that there is a fall zone, that's not just the tower from an aesthetic standpoint, that there is a specific regulation in our bylaws that addresses the falling down of that structure,
yeah,
potential fall.
that was a good catch, I thought. So that's it. We should put that in there as well. All right, let's call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, Chris, Ernie, I'm gonna roll call just to be safe. Bob,
Aye.
Chris, yeah,
Aye.
Vince,
Aye.
Ernie,
I,
Jeff,
Aye.
Stuart.
Nay.
Okay. All right, thank you, everybody. And so Jeff Lubell, I'll talk to Marcia about that and see where that fits. She, just so people are aware, and I know Jeff is aware of this, Marcia saw this when it came out of the subcommittee in their packet, in their minutes. She was already contacted me relative to hitting the timing sequence, backing up from that September date. So she is aware of the need for the select board to work with it. And so we'll get the specifics of agenda timing with her.
Thank you.
And that, yeah, Vince, just to record, I'm a yes on that vote.
Okay, that's what I assumed that.
I'm playing chair rather than member, and I need to keep track of both.
Okay, thank you.
Ernie?
how are our concerns going to sort of be compiled and sent to the select board?
Do people need more than the minutes? I mean, I would expect that it's going to be in the minutes. Is there anything, is that need to be more than that?
Well, I mean, for instance, my concerns are fairly specific and detailed. It's not just simply saying environmental justice and social justice. It's a bit more developed than that. So
I guess my suggestion would be the planning commission as a body has voted on those bullet items. it is then perfectly appropriate when it will be on the select board's agenda. Put in put in a letter into the packet of the select board addressing that agenda item, and you can be as specific and detailed as you want. Jeff?
Yeah, two things on this front. I think the transparency element would be exactly as you said, Jan. Here it is. Here's the motion. Here are the bullets, and at least one member expressed concerns about cost. So even though the commission didn't include that necessarily, there's nothing wrong with saying at least one member expressed concerns about cost. While I have the floor, I have a question about our target time. Now that we're approaching 8 o'clock, and what it is we want to get accomplished with the understanding that we have minutes to do. And item 6 is going to be somewhat lengthy if we get into it.
Yeah, so let's start from the end and move backwards. Are people, I would like to have an expectation in the group of a close time. I guess I would propose that we try our very best not to go past 8:30 on any of these meetings. Is that acceptable to people to have that be our target?
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
Sure.
So let's leave that as a standing expectation, and then let's work backwards from that. I do want to, especially because at least the minutes of the 13th are the organizational meeting where we chose officers. I think it's important to get those officially turned from draft into official minutes, just from a paperwork point of view. And then I think it's important to, at the very least, give ourselves some agenda guidance for the upcoming meeting. And then we can, if we don't have time, and I clearly don't think we have time to lay out several meetings worth of agenda priorities, but we should try and flag a decent plan for next meeting. So why don't we assume we need 5 minutes at the end for meeting minutes at least. So let's go into agenda priorities with a focus on next meeting's desired items first and foremost, and then we'll go from there. So I will take comments on what we think should be on next meeting's agenda for starters. Jeff?
Yeah, I'd like to put this item on next meeting's agenda in detail. And so to follow up what was discussed a bit earlier with respect to what Pam might provide us versus what's or vis-a-vis what is available publicly. I want to encourage planning commission members to understand the zoning regulations, the zoning ordinance. And by the way, our rules are codified, but you can find them separately. So the zoning ordinance, the subdivision regulations, our town plan, the regional plan, and the VSAs with respect to our obligations as a planning commission. Ultimately, I think the question in some ways is, as we were just discussing, is how do the subdivision regulations relate to projects that will create additional units or development? And in that context, I want to encourage the commission to understand the role of the Development Review Board as opposed to the Planning Commission. And in that context, I think it also relates to engaging a zoning administrator to inform primarily the DRB with respect to projects as they're presented, and to the extent possible, how to support the Planning Commission with regulatory updates. So in consideration of all of these elements, I want to ask us to review the rules, the regulations, the plans, the VSAs, and individually think about what our priorities need to be going forward.
So that sounds more like homework to me than an agenda item for next meeting, or do you mean it differently?
No, and I'm going to apologize because I'm pretty familiar with all of the above. I have a little bit of homework to do. If it means a generic discussion with folks who are not familiar with all of these things, I think I've been unfair, and I apologize to everyone. So if we put all of these on our agenda for next time, what do each of them mean? How do they relate to the various bodies? And again, my apology for being unintentionally presumptuous.
Well, I think so, to paraphrase, and I think it is a good way of saying it. Clearly, and I'm first on the list, and I know we have other new members. We need the background. We need to do our homework, but it seems like a very legitimate agenda item to say we will expect everyone to read through them and get the basics, and then that allows us to put it as an agenda item to say, okay, how does this work? Where's the gaps? What are the holes? What are the things that the DRB has been asking for clarification? We've got to have that context, and then we can put them all on the table and juggle them around. We can't tonight say, oh, zoning regs are more important than this chapter of the town plan. Jeff?
Yeah, I'd like to give what I think is a good example. Rod Francis had presented multiple zoning districts with respect to zoning changes. Agree or disagree, my perception of his presentation or his comments about why he would like to engage multiple zoning districts is worthy of consideration. Whether that's where this planning commission wants to go or not is a separate issue. In effect, he was contending with, again, a reasonably held view with what we did in the 95 timeframe in the subdivision regulations to develop density based on distance from town hall and some other parameters. So it's that level of understanding of the rules, respecting what Rod was suggesting and what we may do going forward, that we need to thoroughly understand to help advise or guide or direct the DRB when it makes its decisions going forward.
Yeah, I would add, as I think through this, because I think we have a large task in front of us, and the first piece of it is to look at the whole thing and decide what are the priorities. And in keeping with the theme of maximum public participation, both of the public and other town groups, I would like to be able to put out the query to the DRB, to the select board, and residents, obviously, just asking that question. The planning commission, essentially, the planning commission is fired up and ready to work. What do you want us to work on? And to the degree that both on the commission and out in the public, there's going to be a lot of sort of blank stares because there's not enough background to even answer that question. If the commission and the people with the history and the knowledge on the commission can help us lay out some of the key topics, here are the things that have been obvious holes or issues, and we end up with a little more substantive list of the possibilities. It's not just here are the three documents we're in charge of, which one should we do first? It's here are topics around the town plan, such as the preferred solar designation, such as zoning districts and multiple zoning districts, 3 or 4 or 5 possible issues with the town plan. Same thing on the zoning regs or the subdivision regs. Then we have a way to go out to these other, ourselves and other bodies and say, here's something of a menu of what we're thinking about might be on our list. What are you worried about? What are you prioritizing? What else would you put on the list? So I would take that whole topic and say, get it on the agenda ASAP to get our work cut out for us. Ernie?
As someone who was literally maybe the first member chosen for the DRB, until I came out to this board, one of the things that I noticed were the vast number of conflicts, ambiguities, and basic just irrational sort of like loopholes and so on in the regulations that made the DRB's job really, really difficult. And we were constantly having to play Supreme Court, quasi-Supreme Court, often trying to figure out or set up, because we knew it seemed every time we turned around, there would be a precedent being set, or we were trying to avoid setting precedents or something like that. So we have a really big job just simply cleaning up and making the regulations actually mean something, and actually be regulations, not wishes.
Yeah. Zoning regs. So Chris, I see your hand up, and maybe just for my visuals, if you do your raise hand in Zoom for Bob and Chris who are on Zoom, that'll help me out. I'm trying to keep an
sorry,
eye
so
on
I
it,
have
but
to.
No problem. I can see you, but it's
So it's
it's
sort of a new
small.
thing. So wait a minute, let me see.
It's
Okay,
just
I
where,
have to do
there you
that.
go. Perfect. That will,
Oh,
that will
sorry.
make it. No, my mistake, but I just double it up. It'll make me see you. So Chris, go ahead.
All right. So I'm just gonna extend on Ernie's thought process, because if there's one thing I have discovered in this town is language. Language in the town plan caused an incredible amount of consternation. The language in the subdivision also, I have, again, personal experience where not understanding the difference between shall, must, encourage. So it's exactly what disambiguities as opposed to being ambiguous, I think comes down to language. And I actually, and again, this is my own personal feeling, I think the zoning, if you look at all the bylaws as a whole, it can be overwhelming. And so I kind of think, as a suggestion, whether we create a working group amongst us, again, abiding by the OML, and sort of take a look at any particular bylaw and start looking at language. And I think that's what Marcia was suggesting to you, is to tighten up. And it's what Ernie's suggesting, is to eliminate the disambiguity by tightening language and understanding the difference between shall. As a matter of fact, regarding the decision that we may or may not go into tonight on the preferred siting, has everything to do with the language or lack thereof. And I think, as a matter of fact, the PUC says that the lack of, when municipalities do not have strong language, this kind of stuff happens. So I am totally for tightening up language and
No, it's a very good point, and I would suggest that we're going to end up, whether it's one meeting or two meetings from now, where we are going to want to be splitting off working groups, and it may be working groups for each of those. And actually, the people who are looking at it new, those fresh eyes are almost more helpful for seeing those ambiguities. We're going to look and we're going to go, what? I don't understand what that says. And that's good to flag. So yes, we should think working groups, and we should look for solidifying and clarifying, or just look for those holes that need to be plugged. Ernie?
There are now have been promulgated by various agencies, including federal agencies, and I can't remember the names right now, but there are actually specific recommendations for replacing words like shall and will and things like that. And these are really important because they're trying to make it so that the language is clear to anybody. You don't have to be a lawyer on one hand, but on the other hand, the regulations are also clear and unambiguous, and avoid conflicts. So there's some very specific legislative drafting rules that have been produced recently. And they are strongly recommended by both the courts and various legislative councils and so on.
Jeff?
Yeah, so Jan, just to second what you said in a different way, I think the net result of our next meeting and the meeting after could be subcommittees or working groups to explore individual elements. I wanted to add one element to what the example I gave about what Rod Francis was suggesting, and one of them is multifamily housing, because there are buildings in the downtown that could accommodate more than 2 units, for lack of a better way to say it. So, how do we get creative, among other things? I also want to make sure that we don't forget the community rating system that the Planning Commission was talking about just before this new Planning Commission took shape as a mechanism to address flood considerations.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would, to that end, I would add to the homework list for people, if you haven't, that going back to the last few sets of minutes and packets is a good way to get us some continuity here. And certainly the CRS was one thing that showed up on those. Chris, did you have your hand up?
Well, I did. I was just about to do, I was waiting for you to trying the new thing. So I'm going to extend on what Jeff's saying. And PUDs, especially since we're about to send a memo to the select board, and if this whole thing starts moving fast at the transfer station, PUD, I'm sure, is going to be something that's going to be up for consideration in that parcel. And I know firsthand that that's one area that the PUDs, from personal experience, the word encouraged and standards do not mix from any legal standard. So again, going back to what Jeff says is, he picks an area where he knows that there's inherent problems. So PUDs are, I think, on the top of the list of topics.
Okay, good. Can I ask, I think I have some things to work with in terms of holistic overview of all those things, and then some, when people really dig into them and look at them, they'll come back with questions and ideas. And the goal would be, maybe not next meeting, but the one after that, to be able to parse out some charters for working groups. That is a good big chunk to put on the next meeting. And Stuart, this may be what you want to bring up, but I do want, we've got, say, 10 minutes here before we are going to get to approving minutes and adjourning. And I would like to address what do we put on the agenda, if anything, for the Upper Loveland Solar Project. And so if right now the proposal or the question to the group is, do we put on the agenda for the next agenda the specific question of this commission's statutory ability, desire, or urgency to revisit the letter? Do we want that on next meeting's agenda? Jeff?
Chris had her hand up first,
No, I was raising my hand, yes. I was saying, yes, I don't know.
I think I don't want to
yes,
get advanced. I can get advanced on Zoom, but you can do a thumbs up on Zoom too, I believe.
Oh,
But,
wait. Raise hand. I don't see it, but
no, that's all right. We'll take
going
verbal.
back.
Got it. Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, so Jan, I presume that anyone from the public, anyone could present something for discussion at our next meeting, agenda-wise, if you will, including the Upper Loveland Solar. For me personally, if there's a PUC or a legal or select board mechanism to encourage us to readdress this, and ignoring my thoughts, I'm looking for what the law says and what the rules say. I'd like to see that. That said, I don't see any reason that someone couldn't say, and this commission by majority vote couldn't say, we want to take it up and discuss it, whether it's lawful or not, in the context of policy.
Oh,
Chris,
so I know that the select board has done this, and I don't know if we, the planning commission budget on legal advice, if we, I don't know what the line item says for, and Jeff, this is no disrespect, but I would prefer that we actually get legal advice and say, what do, I don't know why we're all just kind of guessing. It seems that we could actually, have 5 minutes, confer with the lawyer for 5 minutes and say, do we have the statutory authority to reconsider the letter or not? And that would end it. So I'm not quite sure why we just go back and forth, with anybody saying, well, we think we can, we think we can't. So let's just get a legal opinion or
so-
talk to the PUC or both.
right, so I would just ask, I would add to that, I think that I agree with that, and I would just add or ask, we know that the select board has been in executive session and talking to council. Is it worth asking them what we've already paid for as an opinion, or is that different enough between the select board and the planning commission that we want to do it separately? Stuart and then Jeff.
So I've already consulted with a couple of lawyers and been told that there is there's a firm legal basis for reviewing this and or changing it. And that is further supported by the Public Utility Commission Rule 5.103. And I can read that into the record if you want to hear it. What it says is the Commission Rule 5.103 does not prohibit a municipality or the commission from reviewing the validity of a letter of support before a CPG is issued, certificate of public good. The purpose of the preferred site letter is to allow towns to steer development to areas where the towns support development. Therefore, a municipality should be able to reconsider a letter provided this decision is not made for arbitrary or discriminatory reasons. I have strong reason to believe that nobody on this commission wants to discriminate, and nobody wants to be arbitrary. I think we want to review the facts and try and understand what's going on. And that is what the Public Utility Commission is talking about. That's also what the two lawyers that I consulted with are talking about. So if you'd like me to get that in writing, I probably could. So, but I think there is absolutely no reason why we can't and why we should review this, because it's become such a contentious issue. And there are a whole bunch of neighbors that are very upset. There's a reputable company that has a lot at stake here. And we should allow them to make their case and try and understand what the issues are and whether we can or should change the letter to conform to what we believe the facts are.
Yeah, a few things, folks. I was the only member of the Planning Commission that abstained from voting on the letter going forward. Nonetheless, I think that the Planning Commission, with Rod Francis' input about what our town plan says and what we might consider, was valid. So whether I agree or disagree with the town plan, which is essentially the basis for my abstention, has nothing to do with what the town plan says or what our role is in the context of our town plan and in the rules. So on that front, to the extent we want to engage someone with a broader realm of experience. Perhaps we reach out to the Two Rivers Ottaquechee Regional Planning Commission to have, give Peter Gregory a call and say, hey, this is what we did. It was done, we believe, based on what the strictures of our town plan and the regional plan were. Is there enough latitude in that context to allow us to revisit that? Which is separate from the legal elements that have been referred to, which I believe are likely possible. That said, I also want to talk about the open meeting law. I'm not sure how to frame it nicely. The town engaged an attorney to shove some thoughts down our throats as a planning commission, and it was very unpleasant and heated, and I don't believe adhered to the open meeting law. I don't believe our current select board is going to do that, but I think it would be prudent for us to say, okay, to our chair, might you reach out to Marcia and say, what is, where is, the town's legal counsel leading us in this regard? And to the extent there's something that might be disclosed, let's hear what that is. I'm not saying I'm skeptical because this is a new select board, but until this select board, I would be entirely skeptical of a legal opinion driven down our throats.
Okay, so can I, just a second, Chris, I see you, but I'm trying to get a sense of the board. It sounds to me like we are, or I would propose or pulse the board that we would put this on the agenda, put the topic of opening up the topic on the agenda for the next meeting. And then we're, so that's first part. Second part is then what are we asking for preparation to do that? And if that's me checking with Marcia on the select board side, if that's Stuart providing a couple of letters if he's got them, if that's anyone from the public submitting something to that question, are we empowered to open it up? I would ask for the sense of the board on that topic.
But Jan, please include the RPC in this process because of our.
Yes, sorry, yes, you're right, including the RPC. Bob?
I just have a quick question on the process. We keep talking about the initial letter. And I was under the impression that there were updates then sent on changes to the plan. If I wanted to track down the history of those updates as the process proceeded, I mean, I guess it goes more towards my question of the process being followed and whether, answering whether or not, because for a number of people I'd seen in public comment and select board and other areas, their beef seemed to be with the process was not followed regarding updates to the plan. And I just want to, kind of find whether that was true or not. So, I mean, it's one of my.
It's a good question. And I think there were various submissions to the packet that I didn't include the details of. The email that was in there that just had a summary of some documents.
Mhm.
I did not choose to put the full documents into the packet because we weren't yet opening up this door. And I know that Troy McBride sent something in after seeing that. So if this is on our agenda for the next meeting, I can be certain that you will get background information, including timelines and summaries from both sides to prepare for that conversation. I think that will happen. And Chris, then Jeff.
All right, so I'm sorry, do I go?
Yes.
You can pick whoever you want. I'm going to support what Bob is saying and Jeff, because the argument or at least the discussions that we've been seeing at the select board level have been a combination of why was it, going to Jeff's point of view that, why did the town write the letter and say, is a preferred site, which I don't know if that's necessarily the discussion as much as it is that there seems to be a a process. And in a way, I think the concern with NST would be that if we do revisit this, that the preferred siting comes back into play. So I want to make sure that we're open to, or that we understand that if we do re-look at this, that we're opening up both. It's not one or the other. It's process has clearly been an issue, but I think as well, where was it that the town plan supported this site being a preferred, and I'm confused by it, quite frankly, because I've been following this since the day one. And I think there has been a great deal of confusion. So I would like to revisit both the process and the letter to the, as a preferred site. What determined it to be a preferred site? And I think Jeff's idea of if we can invite somebody, and I totally get your idea about the lawyers, but if we can invite somebody from Two Rivers or from the PUC, somebody who is fairly versed in this kind of stuff, I think it would be nice to have somebody of
Okay,
authority.
So yeah, I hear what you're saying, and there are multiple dimensions to this. The question on the table really is the first step, which is it on the agenda for next meeting to talk about, can we open up this, are we in a position to open that? Just putting that question on the agenda, not what's the answer to that question tonight, not are we putting the entire, re-adjudication of the preferred siting letter on the agenda for next meeting. Next meeting, do we talk about, can we open this topic up? Stuart?
I'd like to make a motion to that effect. We put it on the agenda. It's too important to ignore. And if there's a second, then I'd like to vote on it.
Second.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion, Jeff?
Yeah, so my issue is simply our town plan says what it says. Our regulations say what they say with respect to preferred siting. To the extent we want to address a project going forward, we need to change our regulations. To the extent our regulations say ridgeline considerations or view sheds, which was essentially what our purview was on the Planning Commission, is our focus. It doesn't matter how many times Norwich Solar changes the site plan based on site conditions. It's not going to change the outcome with respect to the review parameters. So what I'd like to know specifically is what are those review parameters based on our current regulations? And in that context, I believe we can't go beyond what our regulations say.
So to the motion on the table, Jeff, are you asking for specific background information to be had for the next meeting?
Well, I am. It goes back to the RPC question. So someone needs to tell us, and I'm trying to be polite, we could do it ourselves, which ain't going to happen quickly. But we could have someone like, whether it's Kevin or Pete or Peter Gregory at RPC say, here's what the regional plan says, here's what your town plan says, here's what the PUC says as the foundation for how the Planning Commission acted, whether I agree or disagree, and understand what those rules say to guide us going forward.
So that's one of the things we want to do to prepare if this is an agenda item for the next meeting. Okay. Stuart, and then we'll call it.
So I read previously Rule 5.103, which does state that we are able to review and change if we find it necessary or desirable. So the PUC has spoken. And I mean, here it is in black and white. Actually, it's blue because that's the way it was printed. But, I think it could be.
Makes for a quicker conversation next meeting, but I would say we bring that to next meeting based on your motion. Well, can we call that question to have this on the agenda, this topic of whether or not we open up this preferred siting letter on next meeting's agenda. All those in favor? Chris?
Aye.
Ernie? Okay, that's unanimous. All right. I would like to jump right to the minutes of 6:13 if we could, just so we get those done. Jeff?
Yeah, I have some edits. Ready, Vince?
Got it.
I can give you my red line if you want when I'm done reading.
Okay,
If that'll help.
yeah,
Under 3, public comment. Second sentence, there, THERE isn't, and I'll show you that. It's in my red lines here if you.
I see a measure in place.
Then it says Richards recommended, it was Goodrich, because that was my role at that meeting, recommended. Going down under 4, second bullet down under A, it says Stewart, that should be Richards.
And Stewart is STUART.
Oh, sorry.
I was calling it Richards, so.
You got it right a couple times, but you decided that it was possible to say
Okay.
it a number of different ways.
Okay, I'll clarify.
Under B, Goodrich recommended that every member should read, putting the word
Yeah, I had that
read.
note.
And then under C, second paragraph, Goodrich recommended modifying PC bylaws by connecting them to Robert's rules. And I'm going to give you my red line so it's easier.
Okay.
And other considerations stated that chair should recognize raised hand, but PC members can still note point of order to stay on top, et cetera. Here's my red line so you can see
Thank you.
basic, sorry. And then is that page? I have another page here too.
Okay.
D.
Okay.
And I'll hand this to you as well. I had a quick question down below it. Goodrich stated members of PC should focus on having their respectful interaction with one another, the public and the select board, and just it's grammar. Under E, the group had consensus that a hybrid meeting. The only question I really had in this process was under F, with open meeting law and recent past for sense. He stated anytime a quorum is met, the public should be notified ahead of time and minutes should be posted in a timely manner. I agree with that, but didn't we talk about it in the context of subcommittees? So it's both the PC and committees.
Okay.
Any group affiliate, and that my summary of the open meeting law went into that, where it is any public body doing the public's work, including committees. So we can be more generic to that statement. It's included in saying we're going to abide by the open meeting law.
And then I had under 5, just a little grammar thing about recommended a special meeting in 2 weeks to discuss item 5 due to time constraints, which is supported by consensus. It's just grammar. I'll give you this as well. I have one little edit that on the minutes of May 9 that one little teeny thing. I'll give you this red line and read that.
Okay. Any other comments on the minutes?
I missed the time to adjourn on my notes.
Last meeting?
Yes.
It was 8:40 by.
That's what I thought. I thought it was somewhere around there. I wanted to discuss that.
Okay.
So,
Anything else?
just a question. Vince, were there other people who were present?
Just Cheryl.
From the public?
Just Cheryl is noted. That's the only person who was there at that meeting. Anybody at the 5-9 meeting? Or the
Can we move this one, Jan, as a point of order?
Okay,
first?
all right, let's move 6:13. Can I get a motion?
Motion,
Motion to approve with all the comments I just made.
second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Can we vote since we weren't there? So wouldn't I abstain?
Yeah, you can abstain, so we can have members that weren't present called out as abstaining, Vince,
Yes.
and that'll whittle it down for the 5-9 minutes.
That's interesting. So are you moving on to 5.9, Jan?
Yeah, let's, if
Okay,
we.
I just had one quick comment under item 1, approve agenda. Chickatelli recommended postponing the organizational meeting until, I was going to cross out the word after, that's all, until this SB appoints. So here's my red line, but I really don't care about that one little change. Just
Yeah.
offer.
Any other comments on 5.9 from people who were there? All right, do I get a motion for that just quickly? We probably don't have a quorum of people who were there, but
Bob was here. He wasn't a member at the time, but he was present.
5 members.
okay,
1, 2, 3. So
all right.
of the group, so can you do the math, Vince? You've got my page, so.
Okay, gotcha. So we have Ernie, me, Jeff, and Stuart.
What was it?
Yes.
Yeah,
Who
yeah.
Who
Okay,
else was there, Vince?
Jackie and Brian.
Yeah, so that's a majority of those present. We can move it.
okay. So those, you 4, can I get a vote on minutes of 5.9?
If I was there,
Okay.
you were.
All right. Can we, and I'm wary because of time, but I want to follow if there are any public comments that can be slid in at the tail end here. And that's hearing what we've already decided to do next meeting. Okay. I will take a motion to adjourn.
You got it.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you, everybody. I would just say, please, we should have a lot of reading to do before the next meeting. And the next meeting is regular meeting July 11th, and we will warn it as hybrid.
Thank you, and make the rain stop. Rain, go away. Come again another day.
You can make a motion to that effect, Stuart, and it'll do you a lot of good. All right, good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks for making this work, Vince.
Yeah, I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah, thanks, Vince.
I'm gonna check